I think maybe it's suddenly not having a lot of enemies to hate anymore. Maybe it's because for 4 years now we've been focusing our mind on one little peanut. The win the war peanut, that was all. Get it over. Eat that peanut. All at once, no peanut. Now we start looking at each other again. We don't know what we're supposed to do. We don't know what's supposed to happen. We're too used to fighting. But we just don't know what to fight. You can feel the tension in the air. A whole lot of fight and hate that doesn't know where to go. A guy like you maybe starts hating himself. Well, one of these days, maybe we'll all learn to shift gears. Maybe we'll stop hating and start liking things again. Huh?
That war peanut Samuels describes in Crossfire presents itself as a choice every noir veteran must decide. The Blue Dahlia and Act of Violence both portray World War II veteran experience. However, Act of Violence appears to be a more authentic telling than the Blue Dahlia, because it doesn't necessarily follow the classic Hollywood style, and instead it shows the grim effects of war. In the Blue Dahlia, we observe a show of anger in Morrison towards his wife Helen, when he thinks of shooting her after finding out their son Dickie died because she drove intoxicated. But he shows restraint in his war peanut. The same cannot be said for Parkson, who actively pursues vengeance throughout the entirety of Act of Violence. The Blue Dahlia follows a classic noir trope of the hard-boiled detective, as Morrison pursues to clear his name of Helen's murder. This contributes to the insinuation that veterans must rid themselves of any pre-war past in order to be renewed. Johnny is aided in his reintegration into the domestic sphere via Joyce. She, as a polar character, contributes to a societal norm that veterans must marry and move on with their new lives. Additionally, Johnny's wife Helen and her lover Eddie both die in the film, reaffirming the idea that a veteran's past must be entirely demolished. This love square created in the film's narrative completely overshadows the one authentic element it does implement: Buzz, the veteran suffering from shell shock and bouts of uncontrollable anger. Perhaps if the filmmakers were allowed to keep the original script, where Buzz is Helen's murderer, then the narrative as a whole would come across more authentically by focusing primarily on mental health in veterans. However, this does not explain the filmmaker's choice in still heavily focusing on reintegration into the domestic sphere through Joyce. Act of Violence, however, does not hold back in representing the grim effects of war and post-traumatic stress disorder. Parkson, already feeling as if he's an immigrant in his native land because of upward mobility in society, is further alienated because of his inability to open up to his girlfriend, Anne. This accurately represents how difficult it is for noir vets to be fully understood and aided by loved ones and society. Enley, however, exhibits willful amnesia in order to move on with his life by moving to the other side of the country and starting a family. When Parkson learns this and sees how well off Enley is, it only fuels his anger and desire to punish Enley for informing on their former POW comrades, which resulted in their deaths and his physical ailment. Parkson, unable to prevent himself from doing bodily harm to Enley, is ultimately saved from this recklessness when Enley takes the bullet intended for Parkson and dies. This serves as a sacrificial redemption for Enley, where he pays for his sins. Then, with a clean conscience, Parkson is able to reintegrate as a civilian and be with Anne. Both of these films represent veteran experience during the World War II era. However, the Blue Dahlia focuses too heavily on the domestic sphere that it fails to emphasize one of the largest issues of the war: mental health in returning veterans and its consequences.